Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Docker series. In the previous video, we covered Docker basics, including what Docker is, why it's used, and some essential Docker commands. Today, we are taking the next step and understanding what actually happens behind the scenes when we work with Docker. We learn the complete Docker workflow, understand how a Dockerfile builds an image, compare Docker with virtual machines, and finally explore Docker networking. If you are enjoying this series and want to master Docker step by step, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upcoming lesson. Now, let's get started. Let's begin by understanding the Docker workflow. Think of Docker workflow as the complete journey of an application, from writing the instructions to running the application inside a container. Everything starts with a Dockerfile. A Dockerfile is simply a text file where we define instructions for building our application. These instructions include things like choosing a base image, copying project files, installing dependencies, and specifying how the application should start. Once the Dockerfile is ready, we execute the Docker build command. Docker reads every instruction in the Dockerfile and creates a Docker image. A Docker image is a lightweight, read-only package that contains everything required to run the application, its code, libraries, runtime, and dependencies. Next comes the Docker run command. When we run an image, Docker creates a container. A container is simply a running instance of a Docker image with its own file system, processes, and networking. One important thing to remember is that a single Docker image can create multiple containers, making deployments fast, consistent, and highly scalable. So the complete workflow is very simple. Write the Dockerfile, build the image, run the container, your application is live. Now that we understand the workflow, let's take a closer look at the Dockerfile. A Dockerfile is the blueprint used to build a Docker image. It contains a sequence of instructions, and every instruction creates a new layer in the image. Let's understand the most commonly used instructions. From specifies the base image. Every Dockerfile starts with this instruction because Docker needs a starting point. Run executes commands while building the image. It's commonly used to install packages, update the operating system, or configure the environment. Copy copies files and folders from your local machine into the Docker image. WORKDIR sets the working directory for all subsequent instructions, making file paths cleaner and easier to manage. CMD specifies the default command that runs automatically whenever a container starts. Finally, expose tells Docker which port the application inside the container is listening on. It doesn't publish the port but serves as documentation and configuration. Once all these instructions are written, running Docker build creates the image, and Docker run starts a container from that image. A good Dockerfile should always be clean, optimized, and as small as possible because smaller images build faster, consume less storage, and are easier to deploy. If this video is helping you understand Docker concepts more clearly, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps the channel reach more learners and motivates me to create more practical tutorials like this. Now, let's compare Docker with virtual machines. One of the most frequently asked Docker interview questions is: what's the difference between Docker and virtual machines? Although both provide isolated environments, they work very differently. Docker uses containerization. Containers share the host operating system's kernel while keeping applications isolated from each other. Because they share the same kernel, containers are lightweight, consume fewer resources, and usually start within seconds. Virtual machines, on the other hand, use hardware virtualization. Every virtual machine includes its own guest operating system, making it significantly larger and requiring more CPU, memory, and storage. If we look at the architecture diagram, Docker containers run on top of the Docker engine and share the host operating system. Virtual machines run on a hypervisor, and each VM contains a complete operating system. That's why virtual machines take longer to start and require more resources. Docker is the preferred choice for modern applications, cloud deployments, microservices, DevOps, and CI/CD pipelines because it's lightweight, portable, and fast. Virtual machines are still the better option when complete operating system isolation, running multiple operating systems, or strict security requirements are needed. So remember this simple difference. Docker virtualizes applications, while virtual machines virtualize entire operating systems. And that's a wrap for Docker Series Part 2. Today we understood the complete Docker workflow, learned how Docker files create images, compared Docker with virtual machines, and explored the foundation needed before learning Docker networking. I hope these concepts are much clearer now. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. It really supports the channel and encourages me to create more practical content like this. Also, let me know in the comments if you have any questions or which Docker topic you'd like me to cover next. In the next episode, we'll get hands-on with Docker by working with containers, images, volumes, networking, and real-world examples. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.